My former spouse attempted to run me over when she was caught cheating and subsequently experienced financial difficulties while my life improved. This is a lengthy narrative, but I will endeavor to summarize it as succinctly as possible. To gain a comprehensive understanding, it will be necessary to present this information in multiple parts, as it will be conveyed by my soon-to-be ex-spouse. The woman I married, whom I will refer to here as Y, and I were married in January 2020. At the time, I was 22 years old, and Y was 21. We married in secret, with only our closest friends aware of the union. We were both students at the University of Miami in Miami, Florida, and our families lived in the same two counties. From the moment we got married, our relationship was fraught with difficulties. Y was secretly texting her former romantic partner. Her former boyfriend from high school, whom we will refer to as J, was also a suspect. She maintained that they were merely friends, yet this assertion did not align with my observations. Additionally, he was her initial romantic interest. I am not inclined to pry into another person's personal communications, particularly when I had initially placed trust in her. However, she became increasingly evasive, attempting to conceal her phone screen from me. When I did manage to access her phone, she became visibly distressed. Eventually, I was able to discern her passcode and review her messages. However, despite these efforts, I was unable to substantiate my concerns. Fast forward to March 2020. The global pandemic led to a forced relocation for many. Upon returning home, we found ourselves in a peculiar situation, as we had yet to inform our families of our decision. We concealed our rings in secret, and everything appeared to be progressing well until the first week of April 2020, when she suddenly declared her desire for a divorce. This unexpected turn of events devastated me, as I wept and implored her to reconsider. I attempted to salvage the marriage, but she remained unresponsive. She inquired as to where she had erred or whether she had not done enough for me. She then stated that she no longer loved me and that I was not the one for her. This occurred over the course of approximately a week. I was attempting to salvage our marriage. I was at her mercy to attempt to repair the relationship, but she was extremely stubborn. At the conclusion of that tumultuous week, I came to the realization that she no longer wished to be with me. It was a difficult decision to make, but I felt it was necessary to move on from this relationship. I only requested that she return the wedding rings I had given her. However, she refused to do so, stating that they were a gift from her and that she was entitled to keep them legally. While she may have been correct in her interpretation of the law, I did not believe that she deserved to keep them, given that our relationship was no longer viable. The rings were tangible symbols of our commitment to each other, and I had only been making payments on them for approximately 3 years. The issue was discussed on the telephone to the extent that I terminated the call and wept in bed. My mother inquired as to the nature of the problem. I informed her of the circumstances and she embraced me and reassured me that everything would be fine. The following day, we both visited Wise's home, where we confronted her mother and informed her of the truth. This led to an argument between our mothers, with the latter refusing to see me but texting me to inquire about my state of mind. Our families were subsequently involved in the dispute. It was agreed by our mothers that the rings would be returned to me, but on a subsequent day, approximately 2 days later, I received a telephone call at work from her, during which she informed me that her mother was evicting her because she had married me in secret. She stated that she still loved me and was willing to give us another chance, agreeing to terminate her relationship with Jay and that we should move in together and live as a married couple. At the time, I was in love with her and rushed out of work to meet her. We then began searching for an apartment in the area. I was able to find an apartment that was reasonably priced due to the pandemic, and the move-in date was within a reasonable time frame. Upon my return home, I informed my parents of the news. My mother expressed her disapproval, emphasizing that I was making a mistake and needed to reconsider my decision. My father, however, was less supportive, stating that it was my life and my choice. Over the following days, my friends assisted me in relocating my belongings. I maintained minimal contact with my parents, which was particularly distressing for my mother. On the first day, I felt that our marriage was finally progressing in a positive direction, and I experienced a renewed sense of happiness. She informed me of her intention to divorce me, yet this state of happiness was short-lived. A few weeks after moving in, we were invited out for drinks. Upon our return home, I accessed her phone to discover conversations between her and a former partner, whom we will refer to as E. The messages in question were extensive. At the time of the divorce request, my wife was unconscious on the bed. I woke her by splashing water on her face and began berating her. She was still intoxicated, but I was enraged and continued yelling at her for over 2 hours. At this juncture, I demanded that she vacate the premises, as her faculties were beginning to return. She then commenced striking me and pursuing me throughout the apartment, actually striking me on several occasions and clawing at me. I am not a violent person by nature. I endured the abuse and then proceeded to barricade myself in the room to prevent her from approaching me. She began to weep and implore me to pardon her, even going so far as to assume a kneeling position and vow to do whatever was necessary to rectify the situation. We proceeded to engage in a heated exchange of words, eventually leading to a discussion of the matter through the bedroom door. As the hour grew late, we both grew calm and retired for the night at approximately 4 a.m. The incident in question occurred at 4 a.m. During this period, I was unable to obtain sufficient restorative sleep. By 7 a.m., she awoke with only partial recollection of the events that had transpired overnight. I verbally reprimanded her once more, but this time, she was sufficiently sober to comprehend the situation and once again implored me to remain. She wept, stating that she had nowhere else to go at that moment. I was filled with intense hatred towards her, as I felt that she had stolen me from my family, my friends, and my life. The messages did not indicate any physical contact between the two parties. However, there were instances of high emotional tension, such as her contacting E and eating. She suggested that they should make a video together, which I interpreted as an act of infidelity. After further discussion, I informed her that I would not tolerate any further contact with E unless she promised that there had been no sexual involvement between them. She requested that I cease all communication with E, stating that she would leave me if I did not comply. She asserted that no physical contact had occurred between her and E, yet during the same conversation, I inquired about her relationship with J. She paused and stated that no such contact had occurred. This prompted me to investigate further, as my intuition told me that this was only the beginning of a series of events that would have a profound impact on my life. I will provide further clarification at a later date. Update 1 follows my previous post. We are now in May 2020. When I inquired about any potential incidents between her and Jay, she responded in the negative. This response, however, did not fully satisfy my suspicions. To provide further context, when we first moved in April 2020, I was employed at a call center approximately an hour away from our apartment. I worked from 8 o'clock a.m. From 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., she was not working due to her job being closed. Consequently, I was obliged to commence delivery services via Uber Eats, Postmates, and DoorDash, which would usually commence at 8 p.m. and conclude at 2 a.m. Following the conclusion of my workday or on my days off, I was consistently ignored by her. During the initial night we spent together in our new residence, she would send me messages expressing affection, such as her repeated assertion that she loved me and her desire for me to return home to cuddle. However, upon my return, she would barely touch me or look at me, which led to my discovery about her, and in any case, we are now in June 2020. At this point, I am maintaining a distance from her. I am maintaining my current work routine while also attempting to complete my college classes online. She was not employed at the time, but when I returned home, it was never cleaned unless I did it. Around this time, she also adopted a miniature golden doodle. However, when we relocated and I brought my Mosi along with me, she adopted a different routine. She had previously shown great affection for our dog, but when our new puppy arrived, she seemed to withdraw from him for several months. Despite our attempts to communicate and go on dates, our conversations remained silent. I attempted to initiate a dialogue and explore ways to reconcile, but she consistently avoided expressing her feelings. Gradually, I began to feel that my affection for her was waning. I became numb to her treatment of me until October 2020, when she finally opened up to me. She apologized for her treatment of me in the past few months. We felt like we were both ready to leave the past behind and just focus on us. It was us against the world. This felt more powerful when I caught Ko the following month, where she cared for me the way a wife should. Once I had recovered, she caught it for me, and I reciprocated after that. We began to act in a manner more akin to that of a married couple. She finally began to engage with my hobbies, including video games, anime, art, and photography. She even accompanied me on my late-night deliveries, where we would relax to music and assist each other. We discovered new things about each other. The other individual went on dates, and it was a heartwarming experience to have her presence again. The spark between us was finally returning, but I still held a secret grudge against her actions. Everything was going well until a few days before Valentine's Day 2021, when I made another discovery. Over the past few months, I had continued to secretly go through her phone. However, I never discovered any new information about her relationship with E beyond what I already knew. This time, I decided to take a more proactive approach and examine messages between her and her close friend, with whom I had frequently exchanged detailed messages and screenshots. As I reviewed these messages, I found further evidence of her involvement with J. I discovered that J and Y had engaged in sexual intercourse a few days prior to her request for a divorce. This was, in fact, the underlying motive for her seeking a divorce, as I continued to read. It transpired that J and Y had held a conversation in October 2020, presumably to achieve some form of closure between them. This was the reason she finally decided to give us another chance. Interestingly, I was not surprised. I woke her from her nap and I confronted her about what I had just read, in a surprisingly calm tone. She began to cry and apologize, and then I excused myself and went for a drive to clear my mind. Many dark thoughts were going through my head, and I felt like I had no one to turn to for the next few days. I avoided her actions as much as possible, and we still slept in the same bed, but there was no physical touch between us. It was Valentine's Day morning. She gave me a couple of subtle hints in a playful tone, inquiring about my plans for her that day. It is important to note that I was extremely fatigued from work and my deliveries from the previous week. Additionally, I was still grieving the loss of our relationship. She began crying and stated that I had not planned anything for her. I immediately got out of bed and began scolding her for her irrational assumption that I would do anything for her after what I had done. I recently discovered that I had yelled at her, stating that she did not deserve anything from me and that our marriage was a total disaster. You may be wondering why I am still with her. At this point in my life, I honestly did not have the energy for anything. I was completely blank, a complete 180 from the person I used to be. I used to be creative, making drawings and paintings, doing photography, and always looking for new experiences. I was eager to embark on the next phase of my life, yet I felt a profound sense of emptiness. I questioned the purpose of life itself. I recognized that my actions were misguided, but I simply felt it was easier to conceal my feelings from the world. We had already become deeply entrenched in the routine of our marriage, and I felt that returning to the status quo would be unattainable. It seemed like a dead end for me, and I bear responsibility for relying on her to fulfill my emotional needs, despite also causing me immense distress. The most unfortunate aspect of this situation is that I did not forgive her. I simply became more numb. After this discovery, we again entered another period of keeping our distance. In April 2021, she took a trip to Peru with her grandmother. I was somewhat excited to have the place to myself for a change. I informed my friends of the news and they began visiting my place frequently while she was away. They were unaware of the circumstances. I began to feel like my old self again, engaging in our old late-night shenanigans and old activities like game nights, movie nights, or simply hanging out. I derived great joy from this brief reprieve, although it was only temporary. By the end of May 2021, the lease on our apartment had expired, and I had begun discussing my options with my father that same month. My mother had gone up to Chicago to spend time with family members. For the remainder of the year, my father proposed that I remain at their residence while he accompanied my mother to Chicago. I consented to this arrangement, although I was not particularly enthusiastic about it. However, I did not require her approval. I had two options: remain in my previous residence or accept a rent increase to twice the previous amount. I chose to return to my parents' home in June 2021. My sister, who was still in Peru, was scheduled to return in the following weeks. I felt at home again when I moved back into my old room and saw the layout that represented my spirited youth. I had enjoyed my last few weeks of freedom, but I knew this happiness would not last forever. Y finally returned from her trip to Peru, and the next part of this story is where things really took a turn for the worse. It almost cost me my life. Update 2, now it is June or July 2021, and Y and I are living at my parents'. Upon returning home, I commenced a new position in sales, rapidly advancing to a supervisory role within 2 to 3 months. This afforded me the financial means to purchase my dream vehicle. Regarding my marriage, we maintained a stable relationship throughout the remainder of the year. We experienced both positive and negative moments, yet I remained uncertain about my feelings towards my spouse. I was unable to identify whether my emotions were anger, sadness, depression, or something else. I simply felt a sense of emptiness. The marriage was essentially a mere formality by the start of 2022. There was a slight rapprochement between us, which allowed us to resume dating. We became more open with each other, yet we were still uncertain about the future of our marriage. Everything seemed to be going well until May 2022, when I experienced a sudden epiphany. I invited my friends over to my parents' house to watch a boxing match. I told them about my concerns. Furthermore, she stated that it would only be for a few hours and that she was okay with the possibility of some yelling as we got passionate about sports. As the fight continued, we kept getting louder and louder until she was angry and texted me to keep the noise down. She would then come out to grab snacks or use the bathroom, only to slam the door back to the room after the fight. One of my friend's trucks had a dead battery, so while we were jump-starting the vehicle, the four of us continued to converse for approximately another half hour. During this time, the other individual repeatedly demanded that I come inside. In response, I informed her that we were nearly finished and was preparing to head inside. The individual then proceeded to exit the residence and went to her vehicle. I inquired about her well-being, but she appeared distressed and forcefully pushed me away. Prior to departing for Chicago, my father had installed solar-powered outdoor lighting in the front yard. The vehicle in question was positioned in such a way that the only viable exit was through a grassy area illuminated by one of these lights. The driver abruptly accelerated, nearly striking the light, and I attempted to intervene, inquiring as to the cause of her sudden acceleration. She paused for approximately 5 seconds, then abruptly stepped on the gas, nearly striking me. I swiftly moved out of the way to avoid being hit. As I was grazed on my knee by the car, she drove off at a high speed, dragging the light beneath her vehicle and scraping the road. I was seated on the ground, my face displaying a look of astonishment, as I reflected on the fact that she had nearly run me over. My friends assisted me and inquired about my well-being. I simply looked at them in disbelief and requested their assistance. They offered to help, but I told them to return home while I remained inside, shaken by the incident. I continued calling Y's phone in an attempt to understand the situation. To ascertain the rationale behind her actions, I proceeded to examine her phone, which was lying on the ground and unlocked. After conducting a thorough search of the phone for the first time in several months, I discovered that J and Y had been engaged in a prolonged extramarital affair spanning from March 2020 to October 2020. This revelation prompted a profound emotional and cognitive shift, prompting me to take action on a long-standing issue. The incident occurred at approximately 2 a.m. I was still experiencing distress as a result of the incident. I repeatedly contacted my sister, who resides in the vicinity, to inquire about the occurrence. However, I received no response. I then returned to the scene and attempted to gain entry, but I was able to lock the door with an additional lock. I exited the premises and drove to my sister's house. My assailant pursued me, hyperventilating. I reached my sister's house and knocked, but my assailant pulled up in the driveway. I began knocking frantically as my sister and her husband finally opened the door. This caused my assailant to back off and drive away. I explained the situation to my sister and cried to her about what just happened. Finally, she revealed that she had been unfaithful in the past. I was initially reluctant to accept this information, but I was determined to end the marriage. I requested that she accompany me back home to ensure that Y would not attempt to harm me again. Upon our return, Y was already packing up her belongings. I maintained a distance from her for approximately 5 minutes. Subsequently, she was requested to return the rings and the keys. She was already anticipating this outcome, as she had them in her possession. She promptly surrendered them to me. She then proceeded to retrieve her suitcase and take our golden doodle with her. My sister and I engaged in a brief discussion, and then she departed for her residence that evening. The day was protracted for me, as I retired at approximately 6 p.m. 0 a.m. At approximately 7 a.m., I was awakened. She then proceeded to knock on my window, requesting that I allow her to spend the remainder of the night in her car. She also inquired if I could take the golden doodle inside as much as she wanted. I chose to ignore her knocking, which continued for approximately 30 minutes. Later on, I reached out to her with the intention of discussing the situation. I finally revealed everything I knew about the situation and informed her that it was in our best interest to separate. She expressed her desire to work through the situation, but I was tired of the emotional and physical abuse that had been a part of our relationship for years. The narrative progresses to a point where the protagonist experiences a series of unfortunate events. The subsequent developments, which are presented in a somewhat cynical manner, are nevertheless perceived as satisfying. This is because the protagonist believes that she has been repaid for the suffering she endured at the hands of the antagonist. In the subsequent section, the narrative shifts to a less positive tone. The protagonist's actions are perceived as unwise and self-destructive. However, the narrative does not end on a negative note. It concludes with the protagonist taking steps towards a more positive future. In the third part of the narrative, the protagonist moves back in with her mother. However, this arrangement is short-lived. The protagonist's relationship with her stepfather is strained, and she is unwilling to live under her mother's roof again. She eventually finds her own place to live on August 22nd. In this final section, the protagonist states that I had always hoped that we could reconcile, and I was always welcome to move back in with her. My parents returned from Chicago approximately a week after we separated. The majority of the furniture in our bedroom was hers, as she instructed me to discard my items, including my bed and drawers, and replace them with hers. She believed that it would look more classy. Additionally, we had a couch, tables, kitchen appliances, and other items stored in another room of the house. The day she informed me that she was coming to retrieve her belongings, my father and I left. The items in question were placed in the driveway, but no assistance was provided in moving them into the truck. The individual in question brought along her mother, stepfather, uncle, and 2 aunts, who, in my estimation, are not particularly physically strong. Her grandmother was also present, though she did not assist with the task. The items in question took my father and me approximately 30 minutes to move and maneuver out of the house. It took them approximately 2 to 3 hours to place them in the truck. We observed the process through a window. The woman in question was observed to be consuming alcohol and engaged in conversation with others, in which she and her companions made disparaging remarks about my family. It is unclear why my family was included in this discussion. It is also noteworthy that the woman in question had recently relocated to her apartment, where she was employed in a field of study that offered well-paying hourly positions. However, due to a lack of sufficient hours, she was unable to maintain a full-time income. It is important to note that the woman in question possessed a strong sense of pride, which prevented her from seeking additional employment. As a result of her financial difficulties, she was unable to meet her rent, electricity, water bill, car payments, insurance, and other expenses. She sought assistance from me on several occasions, but I declined to provide financial support, as I believed her financial challenges were not my responsibility. I informed her that I would not be a source of financial relief, and that she should seek assistance from other sources. I was surprised to learn later on that she had informed her mother of the truth and that her mother had taken my side, stating that she would not be providing her with financial assistance. The rest of her family continued to hold a negative opinion of me for refusing to reconcile after she had been unfaithful, but their opinions did not matter because none of them were married themselves. Months passed, and we were still legally married. We agreed to split the costs of the divorce, but we did not have the necessary funds. During these discussions, she admitted that she had still hoped for us to work things out, as she still had feelings for me and believed that I still loved her. I was reluctant to accept this, but I did love her back. However, I was unable to continue playing this game, despite everything she had done to me. It was still difficult for me to hate her, as she was someone I had grown close to in high school and who had helped me when I was at my lowest point in life. Despite making me happier than anyone else ever could, she still managed to break me and made me feel like I will never be good enough for anyone ever again. We still have each other on social media, and although she claims to be struggling with money, she always seems to be out every weekend at the clubs. This usually ends up with her drunk texting or calling me, stating that she was wrong for how she treated me. Whenever I post on my Instagram or Snapchat, she responds. She is the first to see my posts, usually within a minute. She acknowledges that I look happier without her. Currently, I would not say that I am happy, but I do feel like this is freedom since moving out. She has gotten into 2 car accidents just a few months apart. We are no longer on the same insurance together, but she still called me asking if I can financially help her. I refused and told her that she was. Following her departure, I retained her on my mobile phone plan for a few months. However, I subsequently disconnected her line without informing her. Upon reconnection, she sent me an angry text message a few days later, complaining that she had lost her number and had to obtain a new phone because her current phone was still locked with my child's mobile phone carrier, preventing her from calling to unlock it. She also accused me of being a crap and laughed at the situation. I have this ex-girlfriend. The former girlfriend and I parted ways on amicable terms. We remained friends until I got married, at which point she pressured me to terminate our friendship, citing concerns that my ex-partner might attempt to rekindle our relationship. We subsequently resumed our friendship, but when my ex-partner discovered this, she asserted that I had only divorced her to rekindle my relationship with her. I had no romantic interest in her following our separation and continued to regard her as a friend. Following our separation, I was informed by a mutual acquaintance that she had attempted to rekindle her relationship with my former partner, who is now in a committed relationship with a child. Additionally, she had attempted to rekindle her relationship with Jay, who is also in a committed relationship. On occasion, she would reach out to me to inquire about her outstanding bills, her inability to afford to care for her dog, and her eviction from her residence. Based on these observations, I hypothesized that she is likely receiving financial support from her former partner. My grandmother and I would occasionally communicate via text message to coordinate court dates or arrange for the transfer of remaining household items. She often expressed regret for her actions and expressed a desire to try again. However, I also perceived a sense of satisfaction in the unfolding of events, as if karma was rewarding her for her actions. In March 2023, we attended a court hearing to finalize the divorce. We finally filed for divorce after waiting for our turn in court. My grandmother stepped out and began to cry, while I remained seated, uncertain of my next course of action. After approximately 10 minutes, it was our turn to sign the necessary documents. Since that time, we have only communicated via text messages, sending 1 or 2 messages every 1 to 2 weeks. I was promoted to manager a month after we separated. I remained in this position until November 2022, as I was experiencing significant work-related stress, which resulted in a lack of sleep. I was able to secure a more lucrative position that I continue to hold to this day. During the marriage, I gained weight due to overeating as a coping mechanism for my depression. I have been returning to the gym, but I need to establish a consistent routine. I have significant plans with friends for the summer and for myself in the future. This year marks the beginning of June 2023. While I would not describe my life as perfect, I have learned to appreciate the wisdom of life's challenges. Since our separation, I have come to recognize that she deserves to experience the same emotions I felt for her for over 6 years. I recognize that my thoughts about her are misguided, but I am grateful that my life is finally moving in a positive direction. I hope that this trajectory continues. How happy I could be without her. Update 4, this is my final post on this topic. I have included a few clarifications. I had to remove this section from part 4 in order to post it. If there are any further questions, I will attempt to answer them as well. The history of why and when this began dates back to our high school days. There are more details about how, why, and when we first met, up to the point where we got married. Looking back on it, the relationship was, by all accounts, toxic. However, it is important to note that it was not all negative. There were moments of great joy and togetherness as well as periods of frustration and conflict. The circumstances surrounding my decision to marry her, as well as the timing and rationale behind this choice, will be discussed in a subsequent post if necessary. I value all forms of feedback, both positive and constructive. As I have previously stated, I was an immature individual who believed that everything would simply fall into place. I am unsure if I would classify this outcome as a personal victory, but at the very least, it has provided me with a sense of closure. At the very least, I can finally begin anew. To those who believe this account is fabricated, I must clarify that I lack the time and resources to devise such a narrative. I am merely recounting my experiences in the hope of catharsis. I am not particularly adept at articulating my thoughts and feelings in person, and Reddit may not be the ideal platform for such an endeavor. However, sharing my story here with individuals who have endured similar experiences has provided a measure of solace. I would like to express my gratitude for those who have taken the time to read these lengthy posts. It is unfortunate that I have had to endure such experiences on more than one occasion. There was a relationship that ended badly, which has had a significant impact on my life. I recognize that this may sound overly dramatic, but it is the most accurate way to describe my situation. I am open to discussing this further at a later date. Update 5. Today, I am attending court to meet with my wife. She has been contacting me to remind me of our court date, which is today, June 30th. This is in relation to a message she sent on Monday, June 26th, which was to remind me of the upcoming court date. Yesterday, she provided me with one final reminder and requested a few items that I still had in my possession. I inquired about a few items as well. We remained connected on social media, where we continue to view each other's posts. I do not engage in excessive monitoring, I simply observe it when I view other content. It appears that she may have developed a romantic interest in someone new, as evidenced by the recent exchange of text messages. It is unlikely that her interactions with this individual are intended to elicit feelings of jealousy or resentment. However, given her history, it is probable that she seeks external validation and attention. Despite the potential for resentment, I do not feel any negative emotions towards her. Instead, I view this as a positive development, as it suggests that she is moving on from our relationship and taking control of her own life. I can say that I wish them well, as they will undoubtedly require it. With regard to the court proceedings, I actually feel excited about them. I can continue to move on with my life, and she can finally be out of the picture. She has stated that even after the divorce, we can still be friends, mostly because of the golden doodle we have together. Despite my love for that dog, I have to let this all go after we finalize everything. I will block her on everything so that I can move on. I do not intend to see or hear from her again. I have not attempted to meet anyone new, as I lack the motivation to do so. The primary obstacle preventing me from doing so is my lack of trust and self-confidence. In the past, it has been the female partner who initiated contact in a relationship, including the question of whether I should change that dynamic. Currently, my primary focus is on work and financial obligations. I am currently in the process of paying off one of my friends, who is now training me at the gym. To date, I have lost 10 pounds. My friend group and I are planning to embark on our summer trip next week. We have multiple locations to visit within our state. Overall, my life is going well. I will provide an update on the court proceedings after the fact. Update 6. I apologize for the delay in providing this update. I have been working overtime, but today I have time. Friday, June 30th is my free day. Upon arrival at the courthouse, we await our turn with a clerk. After approximately 3 minutes, we are summoned and informed that there is only one chair available for us to occupy. I take the chair for myself, and although I am not looking at her, I can discern why she is staring at me so intently. She requests permission to sit down, to which I respond by taking a chair, and she merely says, "Whatever," and stands up. We proceed to explain the reason for our divorce, stating that we are not engaged in any conflict and that our separation is simply a matter of logistics. On one occasion, the clerk had to walk back and forth. During these periods, she would type something into the computer and make brief remarks, such as expressing her eagerness to be rid of me, claiming that I had trapped her into marriage, and stating that I had never satisfied her. While I do not wish to appear cynical, I believe that she was saying these things to conceal her true feelings. I am aware of this because she subsequently stated that she hopes I will enjoy my relationship with my ex, who is still friends with me, although I have no interest in her. However, she persists in claiming that I am in love with her. Despite our repeated attempts to reconcile, we have not succeeded. The clerk was attempting to maintain a neutral demeanor, but it was evident that he was struggling to contain his amusement. We paid the fee and were informed that we would have one more court date in approximately 1 to 2 months. It was raining when we exited the premises, so we engaged in a brief discussion regarding a few matters. The primary topic of our conversation was the possibility of my assuming responsibility for the care of our golden doodle during August, while she is away on a trip to a foreign country. I politely declined, citing my inability to fulfill this request due to my commitments. In response, she asserted that I am a neglectful dog owner and that I will never see the golden doodle again. Due to my occupational obligations today, which coincide with the 4th of July holiday and her birthday, I am unable to extend my greetings. Furthermore, her family does not celebrate birthdays, particularly her mother and stepfather, who adhere to the principles of Judaism. Consequently, her only viable option is her closest friend, who is likely to engage in activities with her partner rather than celebrate her birthday. I am currently at work, awaiting the commencement of my vacation in 2 days' time. There is no significant change from the previous update.